Hi everyone, welcome to the lecture video. Like I said, we're in week 6, so we're talking about interviewing 101. We're going to go over things like etiquette, developing appropriate questions, and the different types of interviews that can occur, things like that. So, as you can see right now on your screen is the syllabus. It's looking at the schedule, and it's just so that you kind of get to see, a reminder of where we are and what we're talking about. So, like I said, interviewing 101. Next week, we're talking beyond EC3. What's the next steps? What does it look like? And then last week is portfolio discussion. So we are at the end. We are in the final parts of this class, final parts of this assignment, and realistically, for pretty much all of you, the final parts of EC3, which is okay. But so we got to talk about interviewing. So, in no particular order, because if I just went etiquette, developing appropriate questions in different modes, I think I'd drive myself crazy. And many of you have had me multiple times, so you know I'm not that person. So, I actually want to talk about the different modes of interview first, only because I think it reminds us, what possibilities we have, what we can and can't do. So, I want to emphasize that for a job interview or a position interview at a school or anything like that, typically they will be the traditional, come in, sit down, and speak one on one with somebody or with a small panel of people, like 3, 4 people, a hiring committee. And absolutely, that is one of the most default bread and butter kind of interviews there are, is that in person, face to face sit down. And absolutely, I don't want to take away from that because that is what we mostly think of when we talk about interviews. Um, Especially after 2020 and COVID, the possibility of virtual interviews, especially through Zoom, Teams, things like that. So you can now do that interview, but it's no longer in person. It's on a computer screen and it's through video chatting. That is something that we're seeing an increase in, uh, simply because it used to be a whole process of, if you were recruiting people from out of a direct area, you had to drive them all the way to a location or things like that. Now you can do it from the comfort of your own home, which absolutely is an important thing. Um, but it's a reminder that, video chatting is a type of interview and it is becoming more and more popularized and common, especially now. The other thing that has been around for quite a while, uh, but is not as often used for uh, direct jobs that might be part of the job application process, is the phone interview, where you talk over the phone, answer questions, things like that. And that absolutely is another kind of interview. And like I said, we don't usually see it separate. It's usually part of the interview process, to kind of get a general overview and understanding of people. But that is getting at the typical you sitting for a job interview or you applying for something interview. And that is absolutely one of the things that I know a good number of you need to be thinking about because you're looking towards the future. What are you going to do as your career? What does the job market look like? So I understand that. But interviewing is also a skill that is good to have. It's part of communication. It's part of understanding how to talk to people and to engage with people. And so absolutely, interviewing is not just, hey, let's have this conversation. It's actually, okay, how do we go about this? So, the other part of interview can be an email interview. And I know that sounds really weird, but if you are reaching out to somebody and schedules just aren't lining up, you can't find a time to talk on the phone, you simply aren't able to schedule a video conference, you can't be there in person, and you're doing something for like a school project or you're working on a research project or something like that. You absolutely can do an email interview where you ask the person, first if they're willing to answer questions, and it's for an interview, and you give them the basic rundown of what it is. And if they agree to it, all you do is send a list of questions. You send a whole bunch of questions and say, hey, these are the things that I'm looking for information on. Can you answer them as honestly as possible from your perspective? And then when they send it back, that is still an interview. Even though it's not live, even though it's not face to face, it is still an interview process. And that's why I say that's not used for a job interview typically. It's more of a personal interview for, especially, like I said, research. Excuse me. Now, with all those different types of interviews, there are a couple things that are important, and that gets into that etiquette part. And so, truly, one of the important things with interview etiquette that I want to emphasize is being professional but approachable. And what I mean is, you still want to be yourself. Don't pretend to be someone that you're not, because if you pretend to be someone you're not to get the job, you either then have to continue to pretend to be that person, or you show who your real self is, and then it turns out you aren't a good fit, and then you're either asked to leave, you're fired, or you end up quitting. That's not a good thing. What you want is to be honest and realistic with who you are, but still put your best foot forward. One of the things that my mother would say is, first date. Who are you on your first date? You're still yourself, but you tend to be the best version of yourself. That's who should be the one going to an interview. It's the person that you want to always be, but you're not always, but you are that person. So absolutely, etiquette for any type of interviews. I always tell people, be kind and polite. Don't be arrogant. Be calm. Be prepared, and I put in parentheses on prepared as you can be. So, one of the things, if you're applying for a job and you get an interview with the job, I'm going to tell you right now, best thing you can do a little research about them. And I don't mean find out, who was the CEO, when was the company founded, when was the company built, not that. Do some research about the job itself. Do some research about the place you're going to be working. Find out what the environment's like. That way, when they start talking to you and ask questions, you can sound maybe a little more confident. Maybe by doing some research, you'll actually be able to say, so I heard that your place of business does this, and I really want to know more about that. And I'm going to tell you, in places that aren't desperate for workers but want workers, they're going to really want people that seem excited or interested in the job itself. So absolutely showing that interest, having that some kind of knowledge that you can ask a good question, which part of that developing appropriate questions, which we'll talk about in a minute. That's important. Part of a good, successful interview is having that passion. That is something that a lot of places do want. And I want to emphasize, when I'm talking about jobs and places to apply and things like that, I'm not talking McDonald's. I'm not talking Arby's. I'm not talking Walmart. I'm not talking any of the traditional food service, customer service jobs. I'm talking going into a career, something with human services, especially criminal justice, social work, psychology, philosophy, education. All of those things, really, they aren't just looking for a person to sit in the seat. They're looking for someone who cares, someone that wants to put in effort and time into that place. So having that knowledge, being professional, being your best self are absolutely important things. And it should go without saying, but I do occasionally have to remind students, wear professional clothes, even if you are just doing a Zoom or a Teams interview or whatever. Make sure you're wearing an appropriate, nice top. You want to look good and presentable. Um, you don't want to be, wearing a baggy t-shirt and have unbrushed hair and look like you just rolled out of bed. That's not a good thing. Now, obviously, I am wearing a slightly baggy t-shirt, but my hair is nicely brushed, and I did not just roll out of bed. 2 out of 3, not too bad for me. But all right, apologies. My webcam for my computer just completely died. Um, it caused my recording software to shut down. So apologies. Just making sure it's still going. Yeah, it's still going. All right. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Like I said, camera just stopped working. So we'll see. We'll try to figure that out. Anyway, um, before it went out, I was talking about etiquette, and in particular, I was talking about how to make sure that not only are we dressed appropriately, but I was starting to get into, you know, how I'm doing a bad job and kind of intentionally to emphasize what is good and bad etiquette for interviewing. If you are doing an online interview through Zoom or Teams or whatever that video platform might be, it's important to be aware of your surroundings. So, those of you who have watched my videos closely have likely noticed I have ducks in my background. I have ducks on the windowsill behind me. I have a old-timey map curtain on over my window, and when I'm recording this, the sun is usually beaming through it, so it washes out a lot of my features in shadow. That's bad etiquette. If you are trying to apply for a job, don't do that. Try to be set up in a place that is fairly quiet and private, a place that you can talk and answer questions and hear your interviewer. You can engage in all those things, and also make sure that your background is as plain and non-distracting as possible. So not only do you want to still dress nice on an online interview, you also want to make sure that your surrounding area is good. I'm not going to tell you, make sure you're wearing a full professional attire. Absolutely. Feel free to wear a pair of shorts or whatever, sweatpants, when you're doing an online interview. Just don't not wear pants. If something happens where you have to stand up, it's always awkward. So make sure you're always wearing some kind of pants. Anyway, as far as that etiquette continues, so being aware of your surroundings, dressing appropriately, and again, with an in-person interview, obviously you want to make sure that you are as freshly showered and clean as you can be, teeth brushed, things, you look good. You want to look good, you want to sound good. Um, I think actually right now, this cohort in this class is all female, so it's interesting. But make sure that you make a good first impression. When going into an interview, especially in person, you get one chance to make a good first impression. This is across the board for any interviews. You get one chance to make a good first impression. In an online interview, I say be kind and courteous and engaging. In an in-person one, be kind and courteous, but also show enthusiasm. You're allowed to be nervous. You're allowed to be a little uncomfortable. That's a normal thing. But you make sure that you approach it with confidence. And if you ever fake it till you make it, you gotta have some level of, yes, I belong here. I do want to emphasize being overly cocky or confident and being aggressive is not always a good thing depending on the place you're applying. So, going back to that, make sure you're doing a little research about the place. It helps in understanding what would be the best attitude and approach to that job site. So, absolutely. Etiquette's important. And this is one of those things that I want to emphasize that there is conflicting research on, and I always kind of put this forward. A lot of places, when they interview someone, will ask, do you have any questions for us? I try to tell people always ask a question, because it shows an interest and it does kind of force the interviewers to think about it. I've been like I've said this before. I don't remember if it was this class or another class, but I've sat on interview committees before. I've been part of search committees to find people for different positions, and I've been part of that group that asks, "Do you have any questions for us?" And I got to tell you, there are excellent questions and there's some terrible questions. One of the best questions I've ever been asked is, what would make me a better candidate? Or rather, what exactly are you looking for in a candidate for this job? Anything that turns the entire interview back on the interviewer in a non-aggressive way. I want to emphasize that. In a non-aggressive way, that always makes me more excited, because then that shows to me that the person feels confident and is trying to find out, where are they lacking that they're willing to grow. That's what that signals to me. And like I said, there's conflicting science and data that says that's a great thing to do, and some that say, yeah, it's not really. It's a gambling game. It's hit or miss. But me personally, I like doing that. So, that being said, now let's get into that developing appropriate questions, because honestly, that is a beautiful segue from, do you have any questions for us, as well as, considering other things. So, I'm showing now the Blackboard page. So you'll see week 6, 7, and 8 are now all available. Week 8 has the portfolio Dropbox, 7 has the interview response, and 6 is the interview questions. Interview questions, literally just a post your questions. That's all I'm asking for. All right. Second time it's crashed. I don't know what's going on. So, interview questions and interview response. So I want to briefly go over the interview response assignment, and then we'll talk about the interview questions. So the interview response, I want you to actually reach out to somebody who works in the field that you want to go into. So if you want to be a child psychologist, reach out to a child psychologist. Reach out to someone who works in child psychology or who is a psychologist, a therapist, someone like that. Because the idea is you can ask them specifically what kind of important qualifications that you might need or things like that. So absolutely, that's what I'm looking for, is you reaching out and talking to somebody in your desired end goal field. And I want you to ask some questions. And really, I want you to ask questions about, what that career is. So, by all means, the response, I want it to be narrative. So, walk me through it, telling me, I talked to this person, that kind of thing. So I tell you, introduce career you're interested in, introduce the person you are interviewing, including who they are, where they work, and the basic demographic information. Relay the answers to the questions as if you are writing an essay reflecting on what you heard, and conclude by wrapping up what you learned about the career from the interview. Like I said, I'm looking for this to be full sentences and paragraphs, not a bulleted list. Tell a story from the beginning to the end. How did the interview go? What did you learn? That's what I'm looking for. That is my vision and goal for the interview response, because I want you to actually interview somebody. So this gets to that interview questions submission. And so realistically, we need to talk about good interview questions and developing good questions. Everyone can ask, what's your name? How long have you worked here? What's the salary? Absolutely, those are fair questions. They're important questions, and they should be asked. But when we talk about good interview questions, this is going back to the, do you have any questions for us? Good questions are those that require some thought to answer, not just a simple yes or no or a number. You want to have your interviewee, the person that you are interviewing, to think and respond carefully to those questions. So you absolutely can ask, what's the typical salary? And that's a fair question. But you also might want to ask, what kind of opportunities for career development are there? What kind of end salary do you think one could reasonably expect? How long do you need to work there to make a decent wage? Heck, one of the questions that I find students tend to write on their own, and I think is a really good one, and I started telling students about that, is, what made you go into this field in the first place? Believe it or not, if you get the right person, most people want to tell you about their job. They want to tell you how they got there. Go ahead and ask them. Be like, how did you come to be? So let's say you want to go into corrections and you want to be a correctional officer, and you happen to interview somebody who is a correctional officer. You can ask them, what made you decide to be a correctional officer? And I can almost guarantee they're going to be like, oh, well, actually, and they'll go into some kind of story. It's not usually just, I needed the money. That's not usually why people go into career fields. It might be a motivation, but it's not usually the only reason someone goes into a career. A job is for money, a career is for the foreseeable future. So those are the types of questions to ask. So I want to emphasize what I'm looking for the interview questions. Give me 5 to 10 good questions other than who are you, things like that. By all means, you can ask the questions about salary. You can ask the question, I'd say this is a good one, what kind of qualifications are needed for the job? What kind of training? What kind of personality? All of those things are great questions to ask. Like I said, what I'm asking you to do is not interview for a job. I'm asking you to interview somebody who works in that career field that you want to go into and find out what it's going to take for you to get there. And honestly, if it is what you really want to do. Because that's the other part. You won't know until you try, you won't know until you ask. And one of the things that I know too often, people go into a job not knowing what to expect, not really understanding what's at hand, and in a few months they're tired and they don't want to do it anymore. I understand being tired, but not wanting to do the job that you were really excited about usually signals some deeper issue. Either there's a problem with the job site, or the job wasn't what you wanted. It wasn't what you were expecting. So be realistic. Go in with realistic expectations and ask those questions. So, your task is to get me some interview questions that you would ask somebody in your particular field. If you aren't sure who you should reach out to or things like that, let me know, what kind of career field directly you want to go into. And if you don't have any, associations, friendships, family relationships, etc. with someone in that field, by all means, let me know, and I will see what I can do. I'll reach out to people that I know and see if I can hook you up with anyone. But that's it. That's all I got. That's the lecture. That's the assignment. Yeah. Thank you very much, and I will see you all in the next video.